We ask that you please keep your microphone muted at all times. There will be a Q&A session a bit later in the presentation. During that session, please either raise your hand or place your question in the chat. Today's meeting will be in two segments. The first will conclude around 11 a.m. Eastern Time, after which we will take a short 5-minute break, invite Phase 1 Legume Systems Innovation Lab project PIs to return to the program for a short administrative session on Project Closeout. And with that, at this time, I would like to turn the program over to Dr. Barry Pittendry, Legume Systems Innovation Lab Director. Barry?
Well, thank you very much, Jan, for the opening remarks. I will keep my remarks very short, but I'd just like to thank everybody for all their efforts over the past 5 years. I'd just like to comment that we're not going to be able to make any comments on what's anything official moving forward. That's going to have to come from USAID. But we are very pleased to have the discussions today about success stories over the last 5 years. And I think all PIs and all the people that participated, from researchers to management entity individuals to all individuals that had been involved with this, should be very proud of what had happened over the last 5 years. I think we have incredible success stories to tell, and we're hopeful about moving forward. Let's just put it that way. And I'd like to also additionally add and thank USAID Washington for all their efforts over the last 5 years. As well, we would like to thank USAID Missions for all their efforts and collaborative interactions as well. So with that, I'll open the meeting and I'll turn it over to the first presentation and we can begin. Thank you. We will begin our first presentation, and I'll go through this briefly. So these are really, we're going over the phase 1 highlights over the past 5 years of the program. And as I mentioned, we've had a considerable amount of success and some real opportunities for whatever may come next. And again, that whatever comes next will be announced from USAID. Next slide, please.
No. You don't want to bring that up.
So actually, if other folks can just put your mics on mute, that'd be highly appreciated. Thank you. So just looking at the overall program over the past 5 years, our central focus was in Southern Africa and West Africa. And in partnership with USAID and stakeholders and value chain actors, the lab fostered a dynamic, profitable, and environmentally sustainable approaches that contributed to resilience, productivity, and better nutrition and economic opportunities. So this is our main focus. We worked really in 2 cropping systems, both in beans and in cowpeas. Although we did have a mandate to look at other cropping systems, our resources were very much focused in these 2 cropping systems across multiple different aspects of the value chains. Next slide, please. To look at the investments, we had a program about 4 or 5 years ago with what were called initial activities. They were quick start projects that gave us immediate output that actually set the stage for multiple other projects that occurred during the program. And it allowed us to open the doors to look at where logical investments might occur as we move forward. Those resulted in activities that did involve larger investments in our 3 thematic areas, where we competed for a series of competitive awards under 3 areas of inquiry. And then also we filled the gaps where we didn't have research activities in those particular gap areas with what were called commissioned activities. That allowed us to make very key investments in topic areas that we felt were unbelievably, incredibly important for the work that we were doing. Some of the key investments were very important that ultimately will set the stage for what we think is the next phase of what needs to be done in the legume cropping systems. We also awarded a series of 9 cross-cutting themed grants that help build capacity in the HICD arena, gender, youth, and nutrition and resilience. This allowed for collaborative efforts to build out skill sets and PIs and towards issues of these cross-cutting themes that are absolutely incredibly or very important as per USAID's mandate. We also gave out 3 collaborative grants that allowed for partner research areas that were not covered in the areas of inquiry, which provided immediate outcomes. We also funded 3 minority serving institution grants that really helped build out expertise and collaborative interactions between our PIs and minority serving institutions. We felt these were very good investments that provided some very good, fairly immediate outcomes. We also provided seed grants, and these were competitive grants for preliminary work with immediate outputs, as were given in our meeting in Zambia. These were very small investments, but I think that the return on the dollar was absolutely highly positive. We were very fortunate to receive 2 mission buy-ins, one in Niger for $300,000 and a second one in Nepal for $1 million. The first one in Niger was around scaling of IPM strategies for cowpea in Niger, as well as looking at long-term issues associated with improved varieties of cowpea. And additionally, the award in Nepal was to build out the lentil cropping system, which was both of these are still ongoing to some extent, and we look forward to potentially further work in this avenue, depending on future outcomes of the overall lab. Additionally, we were able to receive 1 associate award, and this was really around how do we scale educational strategies. So if we look at development outcomes, there is policy, there is widgets, physical, tangible products that maybe improve seeds, that maybe a particular technology, but a physical, tangible technology. And then there are educational steps which can be taken in order to improve outcomes. So training somebody how to use something in their environment in order to have a positive outcome in a value chain. This associate award was with this last category around how to build out and scale educational strategies around filling gaps in value chains. This was a specific response to the COVID crisis. It was an award that allowed us to really reframe how we could scale our research for development innovations in a very rapid manner. Next slide, please. So the Legumes Lab itself, by numbers, we were able to achieve 32 technologies that were developed. Over 105 publications and presentations were given, and kudos to all the PIs for all their wonderful work in both these categories, as well as 63 people received degree training, and we funded over 30 R&D for projects with 13 country partners, with over 101 researchers involved and 51 institutions. And additionally, I'd like to say that it was, we're very proud of the fact that the teams that were funded performed over short-term training with over 6,200 people, and we're able to achieve a relatively reasonable level of gender balance in the work that we were doing. There's certainly room for improvement as we're moving forward, but the numbers were generally fairly good. Next slide, please. At this point, I'll turn it over to John Bendorf to talk a little bit more in detail about some of the outcomes, but over to you, John. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Barry. We want to just spend a couple of minutes talking about multi-stakeholder platforms. As you know, that was one of our research projects this year. We were very pleased with the results, and especially by the synergies that were created through those efforts to organize the multi-stakeholder platforms. When we do the phase 2 presentation in a few minutes, we'll talk more about this, but you can see from this photo, as a snapshot of what occurs with multi-stakeholder platforms, the alignment between farmers, the farmer is in the background there, co-ops, the cooperative representative is on the left-hand side, traders is Gloria, who is standing up with the straw hat, and then finally input dealers, the person that you see on the right. The strength of multi-stakeholder platforms is that it forces all of the stakeholders to align their interests around market demand. And as you know, with the recent interest by USAID on the product lifecycle, market demand is going to become a high priority in the way that we select and produce legumes in the future. So this emphasis on the product life cycle and the interests of the multi-stakeholder platform align perfectly. And this is something that we're going to carry forward into the second phase. Next slide, please. We also wanted to say a few words. We had the 9 cross-cutting theme grants, and what these were opportunities for each of the projects to enhance their delivery on the cross-cutting issues. As you know, the cross-cutting issues, which are listed there to your left, are gender capacity development, youth, nutrition, and resilience. But very few of our PIs possess expertise in these areas. And so it's always a bit of a stretch to ask PIs to integrate this into their projects because they don't have the background or experience and really don't know how to get started. So what we did as a result as a lab is thought through how we could make it possible for the PIs to enhance their efforts on these cross-cutting issues without distracting them from their core goals as a project. And so what we did is we offered additional grants that the PIs could use in order to recruit and employ the efforts of others who do have expertise in this area in order to improve their delivery on these cross-cutting issues. And you can see on the right-hand side the results of these cross-cutting grants. The blue line that's in the center represents the baseline of where the projects were prior to the reception of the cross-cutting grants. As you can see, gender was quite well represented even at the beginning. However, the red line represents growth in the areas in which the grants were issued. And as you can see, there was quite a bit of improvement in the area of HICD, in the area of nutrition, in the area of resilience, and in the area of youth. These cross-cutting grants were able to highly enhance the way that these projects were implemented. And so this is going to be a feature of the second phase of the lab as well, if we should be granted that permission. So we're quite proud of the results of this effort to improve the ability of the projects to deliver on these cross-cutting themes. Next slide, please. And that's it for this presentation, and we'll go on soon to the next one. Over to you, Jen.
All right. Thank you, John and Barry. And John, we're going to throw it right back over to you and to move on with your next presentation.
Thank you, Jen. Let me pull it up here a moment. This is based on the strategy white paper that we have been working on for the last 4 years. Just to give you a little background and history on this, we made the effort at our meeting in Sally to articulate a strategy for the lab. And from those efforts came the initial strategy white paper. And then at each of our annual convenings, we took some time to revisit the strategy and to see whether or not what we had concluded at the initial meeting was still applicable to the efforts of the lab. Every year, we refined the strategy white paper further. And then finally, in the final gathering in Livingston in February of this year, we did a final revision based on recommendations for phase 2. I'm not going to go over the entire strategy white paper. All of you should have received it. If you have not received it, you can say something in the chat, and we'll make sure that we get a copy to you so that you have time to study it and think through the issues that are presented there. In this presentation, I just want to go over some of the highlights and themes of the recommendations that you made for the second phase. And then after this presentation, we'll go directly into a presentation on our priorities for the second phase. We've already written a proposal. It's been submitted to USAID We have every indication that USAID is considering it positively, and we're just waiting for the announcement at this point. So with that in mind, let me just review again for all of you the recommendations that were made in the final version of the strategy white paper based on your comments. For the pre-production area, we highlighted several things that needed attention if we go to a second phase, and those were more attention to research and breeding for climate resilient traits. This is both the abiotic tolerances as well as the biotic resistances that are needed in order to address not only those abiotic stresses that come with climate change, but also the resulting stresses in the area of disease, pests, and weeds. And so we gathered this up into a proposal for the second phase, and I'll show you in a moment how we intend to approach that. Research and breeding for diversification of products. This is something that will also be incorporated into the second phase, mostly through focus on multi-stakeholder platforms. And once again, when we get to the next presentation, I'll tell you a little bit more about how we intend to do that. And finally, improve capacities of national breeding programs. There's so much to be done in this area, and we would love to do everything, but we know we can't. So I think what we are going to do in the second phase, if that should occur, is that we would focus then on marker-assisted breeding as one of the methodologies that we would like to see every one of the national programs at least have the ability to understand, if not to implement. We know that in some cases it's cheaper and easier just to outsource the analyses to other service providers, but we want at least each one of the national systems to have the capacity to understand how to use marker-assisted breeding in shortening the breeding timelines for their national programs. Then in the area of production, you mentioned that we needed to pay more attention to cropping systems. And this is intended to mean cropping systems in the sense of how legumes fit into other crops, the use of other crops. And this would be, for example, through relay cropping with legumes, which is frequent in Southern Africa and in some of the other areas where we work. And then also through intercropping, which is something that we haven't done much with yet, but we could commission projects in this area as well. A better awareness of gaps through soil health and IPM. These are both very important issues. They don't require a lot of additional research because a lot of what is out there is already known, and we can begin to share those. But I think we'll do more with the use of educational materials such as sawbo videos in order to make sure that that farmers are aware of these practices and able to put them into practice in their fields. And then also context relevant solutions was one of the priorities for production. We couldn't agree more that that's something that we hope to address also in the second phase. And when we get to the next presentation, I'll show you exactly how we expect to do that. And then for post-production, we talked about better alignment with markets and demand. We agree with this as well and have incorporated it into our proposal for phase 2. More focus on processing and nutrition, which also we hope to do in phase 2. Better access to market information. This is something that we've already addressed in this phase, and it's something that we would like to continue in phase 2, but we don't have, oh, sorry about that. We don't have anything specific in mind right now about this. We'll be entertaining some proposals on that. And then finally, a stronger focus on policy. And once again, we've incorporated this into our proposal for phase 2, and we'll be sharing that with you soon. So with that, Jan, would you like me to just go into the next presentation right away?
Absolutely, John, go for it.
And then after this next presentation, we'll pause and we'll take some of your questions and to the best of our ability, answer them. So we want to talk now a little bit about what we've done with phase two. This is in order to make sure that we're addressing the issues that that you brought up in the strategy white paper. I didn't realize that this was actually a slide in motion, so that's pretty cool. That was for me. All right, our top priorities for phase one, we're again carrying these over from the strategy white paper. Our better integration of local and regional partners, more focus on seed systems, more attention to legume value chains, especially demand markets, more focus on good agricultural practices, more work on cropping systems, better focus on nutrition, and more engagement of policy. And so in the next few slides, I'm going to show you how we have proposed to address this in phase two. And then, as I said, we'll have an opportunity to take your questions and comments. So one of the first things that we want to talk about in phase two, should that occur, is our structure. We've done a little change in the way that the lab is structured, not so much in the direction or the management. As you can see there, those are pretty much the same. We are going to retain the resilience resource team in order to do the audits of the projects and assist PIs in addressing those cross-cutting themes. However, one component that we're going to add is the regional coordination. We have proposed to USAID that we will work in 4 regions rather than 2. West Africa, as we've all been accustomed to, but we'll be adding to that East Africa and the Great Lakes area. Southern Africa will continue, and then finally Latin America will be adding to the mix as well. And that will be primarily in the countries of Guatemala and Honduras. We may consider projects in the Caribbean depending on how the social political situation evolves there, but especially, or most importantly, at least in Latin America. We're going to enhance the regional coordination. All of you know Indiaga Cisse, who has been a great support for us in West Africa. And we would like to duplicate that more local coordination and enhance this role. So a lot of what we are currently doing directly with the projects, we will be moving down to the regional coordination level, and they will be responsible primarily for giving oversight to the projects and also for ensuring that each one of the partner institutions has the capacity needed in order to respond to USAID's demands for reporting and especially fiscal management. So what we're going to do is identify a coordination in the region. And this could be an individual, it could be a group of people, or it could be an institution. It will depend on the region and the capacities that are present there. But we will be working closely with these regional entities in order to implement the work of the lab. And the way that that comes out is in what we call the regional stakeholder conferences. So we will have the regional coordinators. They may want to support themselves with some kind of sponsoring institution or a regional committee. We will work together with the entities that we identify in order to form these structures. But then in each one of the regions, we'll have what we call a regional stakeholder conference. And this regional stakeholder conference is going to be a very important body in the way that we identify the research trajectories for the second phase. They will gather every year. An initial conference will be held before the end of this year, hopefully, if all things go according to plan. And then participating in those regional stakeholder meetings will be each one of the funded projects once they are identified, but then also stakeholders from across the spectrum. And this is just a sample. I'm sure that there are other stakeholders that we can also identify that would be part of this mix that are not currently represented here in this list. But the idea is to bring people from across the value chain and other supporting services in order to align those interests around the research in that particular region. And we will be asking the initial regional stakeholder conference, which hopefully will take place later this year, in order to get their input on what research priorities we should be focusing on for that particular region. And the focus is going to be not only on the research priorities generally, but most importantly on those research priorities that will help us move the needle on system indicators, specific system indicators for legumes in that region. And so that regional stakeholder conference will have a very important role in identifying what the research trajectories are going to be. And I want to back up just a little bit. I jumped over this quickly, but we will have a technical leadership team, and this is going to be slightly different than our TMAC. This is going to be a group of individuals who will be responsible for certain areas. There are 4 areas of inquiry that we're focusing on in the second phase. I have them listed somewhere. Yeah, it's in one of the subsequent slides, so I'll bring that up in a moment. But the technical leadership team will consist of individuals who represent expertise in those 4 particular areas. And then we will use the technical leadership team not only to give us advice as a lab, but also to participate in the evaluation of the progress of the different regions in those 4 particular areas. So one of the first things that we will do if we are granted a second phase is to commission 4 individuals who will be members of that technical leadership team in order to do an evaluation in the 4 regions on those particular areas of inquiry that we hope to highlight in the second phase. So the regional coordination will be responsible for these efforts. They will be a liaison for the management entity, as I mentioned. They will train and hold accountable regional partner institutions for financial and reporting requirements, organize and host the annual regional stakeholders conference, collect system level indicator data on the indicators that are identified by the regional stakeholder conference. They will report to the global lab convening, which we will do twice, once at the beginning in the second year and once at the end in the 4th year. They will report out on the progress of the regions that they represent, and then they will finally write a final regional report on the results of our efforts to move the needle on those system indicators. The regional stakeholder conferences will have also some responsibilities. In the first year, they will be asked to analyze the system gaps. And each one of the 4 technical team leaders is going to be presenting an analysis of the 4 regions. And then they will be asked, the regional stakeholder conferences will be asked to analyze the gaps in the system based on those evaluations. They will discuss those regional system gaps and set the regional research priorities, as well as identify regional system goals that they would like to improve and identify key indicators for tracking progress on those system goals. And then in the subsequent years, they will gather again annually to review progress on research projects, review progress toward regional system goals, make necessary adjustments, and finally to send a delegation to the lab convenings to report on the progress of their particular region. Here are the 4 areas of inquiry that USAID asked us to highlight in our proposal. These are best agronomic practices and services, inclusive inputs and market systems, targeted varietal scaling and development, and climate change adaptation and mitigation. And as I mentioned, we will be identifying 1 technical leadership team member for each one of these areas and ask them to be, first of all, an evaluator of the current status of the 4 regions, and then finally to be a participant in each one of the annual conferences for each of the regions in order to be able to give them advice and support as they work toward improving the performance of the system as a whole on these 4 areas. So in order to accomplish this, we will be issuing RFAs for competitive proposals in each one of the regions. And in each one of the regions, we will be asking for these components in each one of the proposals. There should be a resilience audit. This will be by the resilience resource team. This will focus on the 5 areas rather of cross-cutting issues that we've mentioned: gender, youth, capacity development, nutrition, and resilience. And so what we'll do is we'll make this audit available prior to proposal submission so that those who would like to have input on their proposals regarding how well they are addressing these cross-cutting themes and perhaps suggestions on how to improve addressing those cross-cutting themes, those services will be available prior to submission of the proposal. And then once again, once the proposal is submitted, the resilience resource team will be available to do a full audit and to meet with each one of the awarded proposals in order to discuss with the PIs how they might better address those cross-cutting themes. We're going to ask that there be at least one US-based Legume researcher on the proposal, one MSI-based researcher. For those of you who are unfamiliar with MSIs and would like to submit a proposal, we will also be available as a management entity to give you advice on or recommendations on researchers that you might want to enlist in your efforts in order to meet this requirement. We will not reject proposals that don't have an MSI-based researcher identified, but we will give priority to those proposals that do have an MSI-based researcher among the list of scholars. We will also ask you to fill out a preliminary identification of the product lifecycle plan for your specific technology or process. And so we will assist you in this once again as you prepare your proposal. There will be a specific form that we will ask you to fill out that will help you identify how you assume that your particular proposal will advance that particular technology or process towards scaling. And there are things called threshold criteria that we will take into account as we identify a pathway towards scaling for each one of the projects. And then finally, we're going to ask each one of our projects to either participate in an existing multi-stakeholder platform, or we will assist the projects in developing a multi-stakeholder platform around their particular technology or process. And this will apply to policy as well. And we'll work together with those policy proposals to make sure you can understand how best to do this, liaising with multi-stakeholder platforms on policy issues as well. So finally, I'd like to go over the timeline briefly of how we intend to do this. As I mentioned, we will, in the early months after the approval, and we're once again assuming that it will come soon, but as soon as the approval is given, we will do a couple of things. We will first of all begin the evaluations of the 4 regions by the technical leadership team members. They will be commissioned almost immediately to start the work of examining the 4 areas of inquiry in the systems, the Legume systems in the 4 regions that we identified. Then in addition to that, we will also be carrying forward, as you can see down below, some commission proposals to advance some of the technologies that came out of the first phase. So we're going to take a couple of those that are ready for support and give them some initial support in order to continue the trajectory of their research. Then sometime between October and December, we will hold the initial multi-stakeholder platform in each one of the regions. We will ask the technical team leaders to report out on their regional evaluations. And then in those initial regional stakeholder meetings, we will ask the stakeholders to identify what the research priorities for those regions are. and then also to identify key indicators that we could measure progress in the system as a result of our research efforts. Based on that, we will develop calls for proposal. Those will come out somewhere in early 2024. And we hope to have all of this already to be funded by March or April of 2024, excuse me, April or May of 2024. So by April or May of 2024, we hope to have all our competitive proposals identified and funded. There might be a bit of a lag while we do the contracting and get all of the legal issues in place. And then after that, we will look at commissioned activities in each one of the regions. And this, once again, will be done jointly with the regional stakeholders. So we want to get the research up and running more quickly in this iteration of the lab so that you have more time to carry out your research. And as you think about your participation in the second phase of the lab, you might want to start thinking about how to craft a proposal that would meet some of the requirements that we've laid out so far. And with that, I'll conclude and turn it back over to you, Jan, for comments, questions, and answers. Over to you.
Thank you, John. So at this point, we would like to open up the floor for questions. If you have a question, and we ask that you either raise your hand or you may type it into the chat. So we'll just wait a moment to see, feel free to ask any question on either anything on phase 1 or potential of phase 2.
So Juan has a question in the chat there, Jen.
Yeah, so will the presentation be shared later? Yes, Juan, this is being recorded, so we will definitely make this recording available. Anyone else? All right. Thank you. We have another question, Amanda, about MSIs. John, could you explain a little bit about MSIs and how they are defined?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Amanda, and thank you, Jan. MSIs are minority serving institutions. This is a continual effort on the part of USAID to improve the capacity of minority serving institutions to support and also eventually apply for USAID funding. And so what we're looking for is ways in which we can incorporate scholars who are currently teaching or doing research at those institutions so that they could, over the long term, become integral researchers in the areas where we are working as a lab. So they may not currently have all of the capacities that we might desire in researchers, but we want to cultivate their capacities so that at some point in the near future, they would be able to apply for their own funding or support some of our projects as co-PIs. Does that answer your question, Amanda?
Yep, great. Okay.
So I will also add that there is a list, an official list of minority serving institutions. It's available through USAID. They also offer support for projects that are looking to integrate MSIs into their research. And also we will be available to point you to some of the MSIs and some of the scholars who might be able to support the projects that are being proposed here in the lab. So thanks, Jan.
Thanks, John. I'd like to turn the floor over to Eliud Barache. You have a question, please go ahead.
Thanks, Jan, and thanks, John. Really great presentation. Yeah, I just wanted to expounding a little bit on the regional stakeholder conferences. So since we have the Southern Africa, the Eastern West and Latin America. So does it mean this will be like individual conferences being held independently, or this coming together in a single meeting? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Eliud. Good question. The intent is for the regions to meet separately. So each region would have its own annual conference. As you can imagine, we probably don't have enough budget to support an in-person conference for all of them. Some of them will be done virtually, and then those will be combined with the in-person meetings as budget allows. And the intent is for the 4 regions to report on their progress, and this will be shared with the entire research community. So, for example, we would want the different regions to learn from each other. There will be opportunities for us to share research with each other across the regions. And then, as I mentioned, we will have the 2 in-person lab-wide meetings, one in year 2 and one in year 4, at which the regions will present their progress on their research, or in the initial meeting, actually, it will be more a presentation of what their research priorities are, what they've identified, and then also which projects are being carried out and in each region. So the 4 regions will meet independently. And as you can imagine, the legume community is not that large that we wouldn't be able to include almost everyone who's working in legume research in the particular regions. But we'll do a combination of virtual and in-person. And then the delegation from each one of the regions will be at the convenings in the 2nd and 4th year in order to report out on what their particular region is doing. And you can let me know, Eliud, if there's anything that I didn't address in your question.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that makes it much clearer. Thank you.
Yes, you're very welcome.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, let's move to a question in the chat from Juan Arsorno. The question, John, is who and how regional coordinators will be selected? A little bit about that selection process.
Yeah, thank you, Juan. I can't say that we actually have a methodology in place, but I think what we'll do is we'll draw on resources from each one of the regions, as well as you as PIs, about who the probable candidates for that role might be. And once again, it can be individuals, it can be an institution, it can be a group of individuals who form a committee. We're quite flexible in the way that this is implemented because we know that the dynamics in each one of the regions are different. But we will be drawing on all of you as researchers to assist us in identifying who might be the best candidates for carrying out that role of regional coordination. Thanks for asking, Juan. And let me know if you want to follow up on that.
Okay, John, I have a question in the Q&A from Joseph Bateno. Do you already have established platforms, or are we going to establish new ones?
Yeah, I'm assuming you're referring to the multi-stakeholder platforms. Multi-stakeholder platforms are informal groupings of persons who have common interests on a particular value chain. So in a lot of places, there are platforms that are already in place, although they might not meet all of the criteria to qualify as a multi-stakeholder platform. So what we'll do with each one of the projects, we'll work together with you in order to identify potential platforms that are already in existence, and then work with them to expand their ability to address the questions that are raised by multi-stakeholder platforms, or in those instances where there is no multi-stakeholder platform, we'll be working together with an entity. I think you all know who it is. It's going to be Siap Babra. But we'll be working together with them. They will be assisting each one of the regions in identifying potential multi-stakeholder platforms around each one of the technologies that we are hoping to develop processes or policy papers. So once we identify our research trajectories, then for each one of those research objectives, which could be a technology, it could be a process, it could be a policy, we will work together with the PIs to identify either existing platforms or to support them in developing a platform around their particular technology. And the reason for that is because this greatly enhances the product life cycle of the technologies that we're developing, and then also the scaling that can take place for those technologies once they've reached the point of release. So that's the approach that we intend to take. No, there's not platforms in every area, and there's not platforms available for every technology, process, or policy, but we will identify either existing platforms that we can work with and expand their capacity, or we will develop our own platforms based on the technologies that we're developing. So I hope that that's clear, and I hope I've answered your question.
John, thank you. Question in the chat from Augustino Bohr. Could you expand a bit on the timeline for the call for proposals?
Yeah, I think I'll turn this over to David, because David has a better grip on exactly how we're going to do this. But over to you, David, if you could provide a few words about how the calls are going to be developed, and then the timeline for rolling them out.
Sure, John, and hello, everyone. As John mentioned in his presentation, the process of identifying the focused content of those calls for proposal will take place through the regional stakeholder convenings. Those are scheduled to take place over the next 3 to 5 months. And from the priorities identified in those regional research or regional stakeholder convenings, the calls for proposals will be released. And I should clarify, these are the competitive calls for proposals. So we anticipate that the request for the concept notes will be released around the end of 2023 or January of 2024. I guess I would just add here, please sign up for our newsletter on our website so that you are included in all announcements about those calls for proposals. But also we would anticipate many of you would attend the regional stakeholder convenings to provide input into the priorities. There will also be commission projects. For the priority areas identified in the regional stakeholder convenings that are not addressed in proposals that are received through the competitive process, we would also request proposals directly from certain groups to propose research on those areas that are not covered by the proposals that we receive in the competitive process. I hope that answers, and John or others feel free to add if you would like to add. But once again, the calls for the timeline, we're looking at probably the beginning of the year, January 2024, is when we would release the calls for concept notes for the competitively bid projects. Thank you. Over.
Thank you, David. I have a question in the Q&A from Bolam Wang. A proposal requires one US-based researcher. Can there be more than one? John or David?
Yeah, thanks, Jan. Absolutely, there can be as many as you want, but we want to have at least one U.S. researcher. We want to make sure that their capacities and their specializations are available to each one of the projects. So yes, you can absolutely have more than one, but there should be a minimum of one U.S. researcher on each proposal. Thank you, Jan.
Thanks, John. In the chat, Enid Katungi would like to know, is phase 2 open to new entrants who would like to respond to calls?
I think I'll let Barry answer that one. Barry, you want to?
Yeah. Our presentation today is really about our interest of what we would like to do, assuming a phase 2 occurs. Any information on a potential phase 2 has to be announced by USAID, so we can't make any official comments about whether or not a phase 2 will be occurring. So we can't make any comments as per that. I think you should look at the presentation today as what is our vision if a phase 2 were to occur. So the answer is no, there's nothing open right now. We're just casting our vision of what we're interested in doing if a phase 2 were to occur. Thanks.
And more specifically to your point, Enid, in the proposal, what we've done is we are asking the regions to identify the research priorities. So once those research priorities are identified, then the calls will be developed and we will make them available. And then yes, new entrants would definitely be eligible to submit proposals as well. So the answer will be yes, but as Barry said, this all depends on the announcement by USAID.
Thanks, John and Barry. One question in the chat from Indiaga, she say, how would the regional and individual project PIs be considered or integrated? I believe this is in relating to how would they report or who would they potentially report to. Indiaga, would you like to expand a bit on your question?
Yeah, I think I know what he means, Jan. So Indiaga, you can correct me if I'm wrong. So the PIs will be selected based on the calls for proposals, of course. That will be the primary means by which we identify PIs. Then there are the commissioned activities as well. Those will be identified in conjunction with the multi-stakeholder platforms in each, or excuse me, the regional stakeholder conferences in each one of the regions. So we'll ask for their input on that as well. And they will be then named by the lab based on the commissioned activities that we feel still need to be addressed based on any gaps in the system research that are not addressed by the competitive calls. So those are the two ways that the PIs will be selected. The PIs will still report directly to the management entity, but we will use the regional coordination to give oversight and to facilitate some of the communication and then also some of the on-site visits that will be needed as part of the normal lab management. So we will of course not be absent as a management entity in that relationship, but we would like to push some of that oversight down to the regional level so that there's closer contact, especially with partner institutions, around the issues of reporting requirements and also, and most importantly, financial management in each one of the institutions. Because that's one of the consistent problems that we have with partner institutions. We have such different financial systems that sometimes the financial reporting gets bogged down. And so what we would like to do is train one strong representative in each one of the regions so that they are able to assist the other institutions with addressing especially those financial reporting requirements. So I hope I answered your question, Indiaga.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Thank you, Indiaga and John. I have a question in the chat from Solomon Anyaran. And the question is, do you support LMICs such as Nigeria in food security? And how can we key into such opportunities from you?
I'd say great question. I don't know what an LMIC is, but if you tell me what it is, I can answer your question.
Solomon, would you like to unmute?
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. Yeah, LMICs means low medium income countries, and which Nigeria falls within the that jurisdiction. And though I represent Osua Foods, we are in partnership with the Federal Ministry of Health in lowering the foodborne illness in Nigeria. And we are working on so many things, and I see this as an opportunity to talk to you, and that is why I asked the question. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Solomon. Nigeria is included in our West African region, so definitely we will be entertaining proposals from Nigeria as well. And we will expect representation from Nigeria in the regional stakeholder conferences in order to make sure that the interests of Nigeria are represented. So we can talk further about that, Solomon, once we have USAID approval. Until then, of course, everything is uncertain. But once we have the announcement, we'll move forward, and Nigeria will definitely be included. And I believe it's on the list of Feed the Future countries. But we're somewhat limited by that list of Feed the Future countries. We're required to work within those countries that are on that list that's available through USAID. But Nigeria is on that list of Feed the Future countries. So yes, Nigeria would be included among the stakeholders that participate in the regional conferences, and then also will have opportunity to shape the research trajectories for the region.
Thank you, John and Solomon. One question again from Juana Sorno in the chat. Who will be the lead institution group submitting the proposal, the host country or the U.S.?
Yeah, thank you, Juan. It could be either. We'll entertain proposals from both partner institutions and from U.S. institutions, but as you've probably understood from the way that we presented this, what we really want is a synergy between U.S. researchers and the partners in the region. So we will expect every proposal to have at least one U.S. researcher and then at least one regional partner institution as well. So the answer is both and. It could be either one can take the lead, and we would expect there to be both regional and U.S.-based researchers on all the proposals.
Yeah, and so we're not going to vary much from the last cycle in that sense. So, but the lead institution is going to have to demonstrate the ability to do effective pass-through of resources to whoever the sub is. So that's going to be a critical component, right? So as you think through who's the lead, I think that's financial management is going to be important. Thanks.
Thanks, John and Barry. Any other questions? Keep it open for just one more moment. Anybody have anything they want to raise their hand? Otherwise, I believe we will move on.
Just let me say in closing, Jen, and I meant to say this at the beginning of the presentation, but just looking over the results of phase 1 of the lab, I can't say how proud I am of the results of the research that we've done here. And I want to thank the researchers, especially for all the efforts that you put out over the last 5 years. I think we've made a huge impact in the legume communities, and we look forward to continuing this in the second phase. Should USAID make that announcement, but even at that, I can't tell you how proud I am of the work that you've done, and also the results that we've achieved through these efforts in the lab. So thank you all very much.
And John,
sorry, Jan, I'll just jump in. I'd just like to reemphasize what John is saying. We're very appreciative of all the work that all the PIs and all their collaborators have done, co-PIs, graduate students, etc. It's been a phenomenal output, fantastic teams of people that have done some really first-rate work that has really moved the radar dial on innovations to get out into people's hands. So we really appreciate everything that's been done by all team members across the board. So thank you very much for a great last 5 years. And over to you, Jan.
Thanks, Barry. Just one last quick question that's come in from Kelvin Kamfa. Just wondering if we can give any indication of how many projects per region that may be funded.
We don't have a quota, Jan, or Kelvin. We don't have a quota, but I think we'll look at what comes out of the regional stakeholder conferences, and then based on that, and based on the budget, of course, determine how we can best distribute these funds over the 4 regions for the highest level of impact. So we don't have a specific number in mind, but we definitely want to fund in each one of the regions those projects which are going to most affect the functioning of the system as a whole. So we'll take a look at what comes out of each one of the regional stakeholder conferences, and then based on that, make some priorities as a whole on the list, and then fund those. So we don't have a specific number, but it will come out of the proposals from the regions. Thanks.
Thank you, John. So we're about ready to wrap up this first segment of the meeting. And at this time, I would like to ask Barry to just share some closing remarks on what we've heard about over the last hour. Barry, over to you.
So just I'd like to thank, first and foremost, USAID for the ongoing of this program, both USAID Washington and USAID missions. I would just like to emphasize the incredibly positive collaborative interactions we've had both with Washington and the missions. I think we've had very successful outcomes over the last 5 years of some excellent collaborative interactions with USAID missions in numerous countries. And I think it's been very important in terms of the success of the program, of those collaborative links. And I would just like to, again, re-emphasize my deep appreciation for all the PIs' work, time, and effort and dedication to what they've been doing. And I'd like to thank the management entity for all their efforts over the last 5 years. Been absolutely first-rate teams to work with. I think we should all be very proud of what was been accomplished. And although we cannot make any comments about what the future may bring, we all hold out a great deal of hope for what may be next. But again, that has to officially come from USAID, and then but let's just say that very, very hopeful, and let's see what USAID has to say moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Barry. So this will conclude the first segment of the Legume Systems Innovation Lab Phase 1 closeout meeting. We're going to take just a short 5-minute break and invite Phase 1 Legume System Innovation Lab project PIs to return for just a short administrative session on project closeout. So thank you to everyone who's joined us. Have a great day if you won't be joining us for that administrative session. And for those who will, we will see you in about 5 minutes.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. We're going to begin the second part of today's meeting. This part of the meeting is open to all participants that wish to be here, but is specifically directed to the project PIs. Also, co-PIs, other researchers, and the general public are welcome to stay. But again, this information will be specifically directed to the current PIs that are concluding their phase 1 projects or that have concluded their phase 1 projects. I will go through several brief administrative items related to project closeout, and then I will be available, and the rest of the management entity that are online will be available to take any questions that you might have. So first, I wanted to talk about reporting. PIs should have received an email indicating there are, and I'd just like to remind everyone to please mute their microphones if possible. So once again, project PIs should have received an email regarding reporting. There are 2 reports. One is the final technical report. Many of you have already submitted this. If you had not, you will receive a reminder very soon. The final technical report covers the entire project from when it was first awarded until concluding this year. And that one has a specific outline. It is a one document in Word and should be submitted in PyStar. The second report is the annual report, or the annual report modules in PyStar. This is specifically for the current fiscal year. So October 1 of 2022 through the end of your project. The due date for this is September 15. However, feel free to complete this reporting now as your project has completed. Once again, two reports: the final technical report, which is a document, and the annual report, which are the modules to be submitted in PyStar. The annual report is similar to all previous annual reports. I'd also like to mention the data, specifically reminding everyone that USAID has an open data policy. That means that all data generated from your research project should be made publicly available once you have published on that data or reported on that data. For survey data and all data for that matter, if there is personally identifiable information about participants or respondents, that should be or must be removed from the data set before it is submitted. There is a process to making the data publicly available, and we will be providing further guidance by email. Also, feel free to reach out to the management entity, and you can reach out directly to me if you would have any questions about how to prepare your data set to make it publicly available. A third item we would like to touch base on is publications. USAID wants the great research that you have done to be publicly available, and this involves paying the publication cost to make the publications or the journal articles open access. If this is a burden, there are 2 scenarios to support covering the publication costs. First, we've heard a lot about the possible phase 2. Should the Legume Systems Innovation Lab be extended through phase 2, please contact the management entity about covering these publication costs and what resources are available for that. In a second scenario, if phase 2 is not awarded, or if you have a publication that is made after a potential phase 2 ends, USAID is working to create a funding mechanism for publications from Feed the Future Innovation Labs to cover these expenses after the management entity ends, so that we understand there's a lag between when the research takes place, and often the management entities or the innovation labs conclude, and then publications are finally accepted or if the publications are made in the future. USAID is looking to create a funding mechanism for this. Once again, please contact our management entity for further information about the publication costs for open access to journal articles. A fourth announcement is regarding environmental mitigation and monitoring plans, or EMMPs, and records of compliance. This has to do with the projects that utilize pesticides and fertilizers. We need to submit a record of compliance detailing the compliance with the proper purchase, storage, use, and disposal of pesticides and fertilizers during the project. A template has been sent out by email to the projects that included use of pesticides and fertilizers. And once again, please email the management entity, contact the management entity should you have questions about completing the record of compliance. A fifth item we wanted to remind you of is that the project pages on the Legume Systems Innovation Lab's website will remain active. And we encourage you to send any content such as articles or final project data that you want to make public to Jan Fierro to be included on your project page of the Legume Systems Innovation Lab. Please be sure to utilize this resource and share the link widely for exposure of your project and the research. And then finally, 2 reporting items related to financial. You will remember that we have requested quarterly how much of your project budget has been spent in country, the in-country spending reports. We are going to look over the final amount that has been submitted, and we will contact project PIs and financial officers to finalize the total that was spent in each country. This is because USAID requests a total amount that is spent outside of the US. And then finally, this final portion of your projects included the tax year of 2023. So there will also be, you will also receive an email regarding the foreign taxes that were paid by the project during tax year 2023. Those are the administrative updates that we have. We will be sending an email reminding you of each of these items. At this time, Jan, if you're available, would you be willing to field any questions that come in regarding these? Thank you.
Absolutely. If anybody has any questions, either in the chat, raise your hand. You can stick them in the Q&A. We will find them wherever you put them. I see Manuel Tamo. You have your hand raised. The floor is yours. Manu, can you please unmute? Oh, I see you're unmuted, but we're not hearing you. Perhaps your microphone is not working.
Can you hear me now?
Ah, we can hear you now. There you are.
You know, I plugged in my external speakers. Sorry.
We've got you loud and clear. Go ahead.
All right. So, hi, everyone. No, a quick question about publications, you know, because, of course, there are quite a number of publications which will appear after this phase ending. So how, just curious, how will they be accounted for? I mean, if they're accounted for in the second phase, that's kind of cheating, isn't it?
So thanks, Manu, for that really, I think, excellent question. So if hypothetically a second phase occurs, it's a cost that it would hypothetically, well, let me just say it this way. If hypothetically a second phase were to occur, then becomes a costed extension of the existing program. So it becomes an output of the overall program over a 10-year period if that publication occurs within the 10-year period. So from that perspective, we would still like to know about it, count it, and let USAID know that that is available. So John, maybe would you like to, or anybody else on the team, would you like to further comment on that?
I'll just say that USAID is considering developing a fund to support publications post lab closing. And you're right, Mano, those would be considered or accredited under the first phase of the lab, not under the second phase. But David, I think you know more about those, the funding work that the USAID is doing and when that might be available. So I'll hand it over to you, David.
Sure, thank you for the question, Manu and Barry and John. Just adding to what you both indicated, yes. So as far as reporting, we will continue to want to count, and USAID also looks to count the number of publications that are generated, even if it was under phase one. They would like to know those numbers. And as John has mentioned, USAID informed us, I believe it was in May, that they are working on developing this mechanism to support publication costs after the conclusion of the management entities. This goes for all innovation labs, not just the Legume Systems Innovation Lab. To my knowledge, that has not yet been officially implemented. However, it is in the process. So as we know more information about that, we will let you know. Over.
All right. Thank you, everyone, on that. Question from Augustine in the chat regarding data. PyStar has a module for submitting data. Should we submit our data now or wait until the data is published?
Yeah, great question, Augustine. So in PyStar, what you will have the opportunity to enter the various data sets that are being collected. So, and for each one of those entries, there's a question if the data is still in process, if it has been collected, if the data cleaning, and that is where you'll be able to indicate if you are still waiting for a publication. So although PyStar is where you would report it, and you might even have the opportunity, I'm trying to remember, there might be an area for you to upload the data set. Ultimately, this will be shared in a system such as Dataverse or something like that. And then there will be an entry in the DDL, Digital Data Library, I believe it is, of USAID with a link to where it is available. So we can provide more information on making the data publicly available, that process. But the first step, as you rightly indicated, is reporting in PyStar the number of data sets that are being collected and what the current status is, if they are ready to be made publicly available because a publication has been made, or if the publication is not yet ready and so there is an embargo, or if there's a time while you are still processing the data. Back to you, Jan.
Thank you, David. I saw Joe Husing had his hand up. Joe, did you intentionally?
No, David answered the question. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. Any other questions? Looks like not. Well, great. Thank you, David, for presenting all that administrative detail. And just to close out today's meeting, I'd like to turn it over to John and Barry for just some final words. John, would you like to go first?
Yeah, thanks, Jan. I won't add much to my previous words, but I'm just very proud and very honored to work with you over the last 5 years. And I hope that we can continue this adventure in the near future. So thanks, everyone.
And so I'd just like to reiterate John's words. I think one of the things we also want to highlight for Closeout today our incredible level of thanks to USAID Washington, USAID Mission. But I also really want to emphasize our thanks to the TMAC. The TMAC has played a very important role throughout this whole process of shaping the program. They are individuals that have taken a considerable amount of time and effort out of their careers and their time and daily activities in order to help shape this program. And I would just like to thank those members of the TMAC for their dedication over the last 5 years to this program. And as well, finally, to the researchers for all your efforts to this point. And as we said before, we're hopeful about moving forward, but that will have to come officially from USAID. So thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.
And with that, I think we will conclude for today, and everyone have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you. We'll see you soon.
Thank you too.
Thanks, everyone. See you soon indeed.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you.
Gloria.
We are very grateful.
Thank you.